So I read these two books back to back, and I absolutely loved the first book, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This one was a 5 out of 5 for me. And then A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor was a 4 out of 5. I think if you are going to read these books, just buy them both and read them back to back. I think my thing with duologies is most of the time they could just be one big book, but they split them into two. Probably just for editing purposes, just so that it's a little bit easier to edit the book. But if they were to combine these two, it would just be one whole story told pretty quickly. The pacing in both of these books goes by so fast. I feel like the pacing in the first book went by a little bit quicker for me than the pacing in the second book. The first book is about this girl named April. She stumbles upon this statue that she thinks is an art piece. She has her friend come over and they do this little video where it's kind of like a news reporting of this statue, and they're like, we just discovered this art piece, and there's no creative that's behind it, and we wonder if it's like some piece that somebody just installed and it's like a pop-up piece. And it kind of reminded me of when the monoliths started popping up all over the United States, and I think all over the world. I don't know if that happened all over the world, but I think it happened all over the United States, where there was these monoliths that were just popping up out of nowhere, and there was really no explanation. But in this book, the explanation for those monoliths, the statues popping up, it's aliens. So since April is the first person to discover these aliens, she names them Carl, and Carl sends the entire world, all of Earth, on this kind of like scavenger hunt, and he implants dreams into people, and it's kind of like Inception, that first book, where they have to solve these puzzles in their dream, and not just one person can solve the puzzle. It has to be everybody as a collective, and everybody has to work together. And there'll be some puzzles that will require different cultures to solve them, and different knowledge from different cultures, different practices. So somebody in the United States wouldn't necessarily be able to solve a puzzle unless they had knowledge of that cultural practice from that other culture in that other country, if that makes sense. So it just kind of felt like a goose chase. It felt like Inception. You had dream sequences where April was trying to solve problems in the dream. And that's why I absolutely love this one. This one was stellar. This one was phenomenal. April does a lot of questionable things, but she does them because she knows that she has to do it. She has to solve the riddle to these problems. And it's one of those things where everybody around her judges her, until this is why I think these two books work so well together, and they work better as one book, even though this has always been my ideology that duologies should always just be one book. But I think for editing purposes, like I said, it just makes it a lot easier. But these two books work so well together. So April in the first book is constantly just doing things that she has to do because she's trying to solve this problem, and she sees that it's for the greater good, that this her solving this problem is gonna benefit everybody in society, and her working with Carl, the statue, is gonna help her get to where she needs to go and find the answers that she needs to find. And in this second book, everybody is brought along. Her entire friend group is brought along onto this ride. While they were judging her in the first book for all her actions, and everybody was kind of being like, hey, this is kind of questionable, in the second book, everybody turns questionable. Her entire friend group is kind of forced to do everything they need to do in order to survive. I couldn't stop reading these. My fiance thought I was crazy because I finished the first book in one night. I absolutely would reread the first book over and over and over again. The second book was okay. It was good 4 out of 5. I feel like the ideas in the second book were very focused on social commentary, and there was social commentary in the first book that you could pick up on, and it didn't feel like you were getting beat over the head with the social commentary. But in the second book, it gets to this point where you understand the social commentary, but you're still getting beat over the head with it, and you're just kind of like, I need you to like fast forward a little, buddy. Just get to the plot line. You know what I mean? There were times where information felt like you were getting beat over the head, but I understood why, because the characters were really going through it. And they were kind of trying to figure out if they were going to be doing good, if they were going to be doing wrong. They realized that they were kind of falling into April's pattern of what is morally gray versus what is absolutely wrong versus is somebody else's good, somebody else's wrong. The effects of social media, how social media can bring us together, how social media can separate us, how social media can make us very divisive versus how social media can actually unite us and get us to a point where we're more one entity versus individual people. And though we are all individuals and we all have our individual personalities, we always work better as a whole. And whenever we have to make change, it works better to do it as a whole versus to do it as an individual. While there's individual things that you can do to help with change and everybody has to do their own part, the idea is that in everybody doing their small little thing to do change and to make change in the world, it works as a whole because everybody's working together in order to defeat this big bad, to combat whatever is going up against the whole community, everybody as a human civilization, everybody as a human race. I think this first book absolutely has my heart. Both of these books have my heart. I love them. They were trippy, they were a little bit interesting. Would I recommend everybody reading this? I definitely do recommend everybody reading these. I think with the whole clock app ban potentially becoming a thing and how that potentially could affect us all, how it could affect us as a whole, the change that we would need to make, the small things that we would have to do in order to prevent this ban from going through. I think we really have to unite as one and try to prevent that from happening. But not just that, there's a series of some things that will always be going on. And that's kind of the message of this book, where there's always going to be somebody vying for power, and there's always going to be a power struggle that we are going to be up against. But if we face it as a whole and as a community, we will be able to overcome that. Versus if we try to face it individually or to just ignore the problem altogether, then nothing will ever happen and nothing will ever get done. And the only way to get stuff done is through discomfort. Like I said, these books are meaty with their messages. They are quick paced. It's a duology. If you don't want to read 3 books and you want books that just kind of get to the point, these books really get to the point. I'm glad for that Barnes & Noble employee that gave me that discount for this book, because I absolutely love these books. I paid full price for the second book because I needed it. I absolutely needed to read the second book. And I'm happy with how this duology ended. Even though I did want to explore more space stuff, this is more social commentary with space elements to it, with existential elements to it, with everything else that it explores through social interactions and all of that. If you do read this, message me, tell me if you liked it, tell me if you loved it. I absolutely love the first book. If you can get your hands on this book and you absolutely do not want to continue the series, then you do not have to continue the series. But this book, just this first book, is crazy to me. This felt like Inception, and this had me glued to the pages. I went through this 4-hour audiobook so quickly.